Hi guys, welcome to the channel. In my last few videos you've seen me use extenders extensively in low light, high ISO situations and even on zoom lenses. But how does that go together with what I've said in the past about extenders and that they shouldn't be used on zoom lenses and that are mainly good for large, fast prime lenses? Is that still true, or has the game changed and we can use extenders on all sorts of lenses now? And the answer is a clear and sound, it depends. Maybe not exactly what you were hoping to hear, so let's look into situations where using an extender is far superior to using the bare lens and cropping, and then other situations where cropping and not using extenders is superior. I'm also going to show you a lot of examples taken with different lens and camera combinations from Canon and Sony to see where I think using extenders is definitely advantageous to just using the bare lens. I'm also going to show you some examples of the 100-500 with the 2x extender, comparing that to the RF 800 f11mm lens, because that's something a lot of you have been asking. I think that's actually quite an interesting question. Extenders always sound like such a good and relatively inexpensive solution, but sometimes if something sounds too good to be true, it often is. So we can't just go out buying extender, slap it on a cheap lens and expect it to give us double the focal length without any sort of drawbacks. Generally speaking, extenders always come with drawbacks, and you will have to expect to make some sacrifices in return for getting that extra focal length. The biggest mistake I see people making is that they're using extenders to photograph subjects that are already too far away. They're like tiny in your frame, and then you slap on a 2x extender and expect magical sharpness and a frame filling photo. That's not really how it works. Extenders shine the most when you use them to get something bigger in your frame that's already kind of large in your frame. Then you can put on a 2x extender and you will generally get some good results. If the bird's already too far away from you, you're just emphasizing all the problems you already have in that frame, because there's so much distance between you and the bird, and things like heat haze and just not as great sharpness are just becoming emphasized over that large distance, and most of your results will generally be quite disappointing. If you can, you should try and avoid using extenders, simply because there's no lens that works better with extenders than without extenders. So let's look at some sample images that I've taken. The first examples I want to show you are taken with the Sony A1, the 200-600mm lens and the 1.4 extender. If we zoom in to 100%, you can see that, in my opinion at least, the quality of the 200-600mm lens with the 1.4 extender at 840mm is really exceptional, and this is an image I'm really happy with. Next image, really low light situation, end of the day, 200-600, 1.4 extender, and in the very last light, the 200-600 really performed outstanding with the 1.4 extender on the A1. Another example of a singing honeyeater, we zoom into that again. I think with the 1.4 extender on the 200-600, especially in combination with the A1, I was getting fantastic results. Just one last image of a shell duck a little bit further away, but even at a larger distance I was still getting really good sharpness. And this is probably one of the main things that positively surprised me when I was using the A1 with the 200-600mm lens, because it handled the 1.4 extender so well. It was definitely a usable combo and probably the best zoom lens I've used when it comes to using it with extenders as well, even better than the Canon 100-500mm lens. I was very impressed when using it, and I can, well, highly recommend at least the 1.4 extender if you're having a 200-600mm lens, and at least with the A1, the autofocus and everything else still worked really well. Next, I want to show you a few sample images from the 100-500mm lens. The first one is with no extender on. You can see how incredibly sharp and detailed that lens is. And now we have a cockatoo with the 100-500 and the 2x extender. You can see that sharpness and detail is suffering a little bit, but overall I think this is still kind of a surprising result, because the quality overall I think is still acceptable. I don't get every shot this sharp with the 2x extender, so there's definitely more shots that are not critically sharp, but you can still get some pretty good results, but you have to be willing to keep up with less consistent results. But overall, I think this result would be better than shooting this at 500 millimeters and then cropping. Here's another interesting example of a yellow-tailed black cockatoo that was just sitting on this branch and just couldn't get close enough, or there was too much stuff in the front for me to get a full body shot. So I tried to get closer, tried to get this shot. This is at 700 millimeters with the 1.4 extender. You can see it might not be the sharpest shot in the world, but it's still pretty acceptable quality. But I still kind of didn't know what to do with this image because it's too far away to really crop. And I think the only thing I saw in this scene was like a cool kind of headshot, especially if it was like raising up the crest or something. So I said, why not put the 2x extender on? It was kind of low light, high ISO, but autofocus worked well. And if we zoom into that, we can see that I think the image quality is still pretty nice and acceptable with a lot of details, and with a little bit of extra sharpening, I think I can actually transform this into a really nice headshot. Here's an example. Now we can see that the bird actually just before it took off raised its crest a little bit. So I got this nice shot. This is the raw file. And then here you see the final version that I envisioned in the field. Just a nice headshot with the crest up. I got rid of some of those annoying sticks and actually that bit of branch that was sticking out from the side as well. And if you want to know how to remove these things and how to edit your bird images to perfection, make sure to check out my masterclass down there in the description. So let's talk about the age-old question. Is it better to use the bare lens and crop or use an extender? You may have already gotten the feeling that I'm personally a fan of using an extender where it makes sense, and I think this example can show that as well. This is the 100 to 500 millimeter lens at 500 millimeters, and this is the 100 to 500 millimeter lens at 1000 millimeters. And you can see that nothing really changed. The background still looks the same, but the bird is significantly larger in the frame with the 2x extender now, giving me much more pixels on the bird. So if we zoom into this, we can see the 100 to 500 millimeter shot without extender has pretty good image quality. And then if we zoom into the 2x extender shot that we see, it's still decent, but we lost a little bit more detail. But when we now crop the 100 to 500 millimeter shot to the same size in the frame as the 2x extender shot at 1000 millimeters, and if we actually compare this now to the file with the 2x extender, we have a 16 megapixel image that has maybe slightly better overall quality, but the file is a lot smaller. And now what I could do, I could grab my 2x extender file and downsize it to the 16 megapixels of the crop file. The downsized 2x extender file has actually slightly more detail. So in the end, I think this is a good example where using the extenders might make you sacrifice a little bit of image quality, but it gives you a lot more flexibility afterwards because you have a lot more pixels on the bird. That means you can maybe even still go for headshot or crop tighter, printed larger. I've mainly showed you examples of extenders on zoom lenses simply because this is really where it has changed recently with the A1 and the 200 to 600 and the R5 and the 100 to 500. There's actually a few zoom lenses now where you can use extenders quite successfully, but to just show you that obviously they really shine on prime lenses is this example of that Cape Barren goose where we zoom in 840 millimeters and we still get some really good image quality. What I want to show you next is a very interesting question. So a lot of you have been asking me, would you buy 100 to 500 and the extenders, or would you buy 100 to 500 and buy an f11 800 millimeter lens instead of using the extenders? And I find this question really hard to answer, and I think it comes down to what you want. If you have the extenders with the 100 to 500 millimeter lens, it gives you a lot of flexibility and it's not much to carry with you. If you have the 100 to 500 and an 800 millimeter lens, it's a lot more to carry, and it's actually harder to change things quickly in the field because if I'm out in the field, I have the 100 to 500 millimeter lens, I usually have both of the extenders somewhere in my pockets and my pants. I couldn't do that with an 800 millimeter lens. I would have to have it in a backpack or somewhere else. So let's look at a couple of examples, but my gut feeling is that the 800 is probably slightly better, slightly sharper, slightly more consistent than 100 to 500 with the 2x extender. But you're paying for it in a lot less flexibility, and as you may have guessed in this video now already, I do value flexibility and options a lot. So personally, I think I'm more drawn to the 100 to 500 with the extenders. But if you're not bothered by having an extra lens with you in your backpack, for instance, I think the 800mm lens can be a very good option for you. So here's the first example, 100 to 500 2x extender, stop down to f16, and you can see some quite nice quality. And here we have a hooded plover R5 f11 800mm lens, and I think pretty much similar image quality. We can look at these side by side now, and I think there's really not much between those two shots, is there? So if both perform at their best, you can get some very comparable images, and the 100 to 500 actually has a clear advantage there then. However, I must say that on average, you get more sharp images with the 800 than the 100 to 500 with the 2x extender. And it's very recommendable that you stop down when using extenders, especially on zoom lenses. However, with the 100 to 500, that's kind of a problem, because with the 1.4 extender, it's wide open at f10. With the 2x extender, it's wide open at f14. So stopping down from f14 really becomes a bit problematic, because you end up using like 6400 ISO f16 or f18 on a sunny day, which is really not that great. And it does perform well wide open as well, but it does benefit from stopping down. And overall, it's a little less consistent. And that's what we can see in this example now. If we zoom into 100%, you can see that you get shots that are a little bit soft when using the 100 to 500 with the 2x extender. And on average, I felt like you're getting more crisp shots with the 800mm lens. But funnily enough, it really depends on the circumstances as well. Obviously, how good the light is and how good your technique is and how good the autofocus works on a given day. So with the 100 to 500 and the 2x extender, sometimes I get exceptional results, and then sometimes I get results I'm not too happy about, especially if the bird's a bit too far away and I'm just trying to force it with the 2x extender. The results are usually not that good. Since we're talking about extenders, I also wanted you to see a very extreme example. This is the f11 800mm lens with the RF 2x extender, wide open at f22. Completely crazy, so let's have a look. Obviously, the image quality is not amazing anymore, but considering that you are holding a little lens and have 1600mm of focal length in your hand that you can handhold, is pretty amazing. So would I recommend using extenders on the 800 f11 lens? Probably not, but if you're more after just ID shots, you don't care about the last bit of sharpness, this might actually still be an option for you, especially if you're a birder that just wants to photograph distant birds. So you have a 1600mm walk around combo. Crazy. When it only comes to image quality and not using extenders, the 100 to 500 is the clear winner. But with extenders, the results are a lot more mixed, and I would say it actually comes down to your personal preference. Do you prefer to have two little extenders that actually cost more than the 800mm lens, or are you happy to carry another extra lens with you? So personally, I'm definitely a fan of extenders, especially when I can still get good image quality, simply because I get more pixels on the bird. That gives me more flexibility when I'm editing my images. However, extenders definitely come with a lot of drawbacks, and one drawback is that you're losing a lot of depth of field when using extenders. So let's have a look at this rose robin image. That's actually quite interesting, because this is the image without the extender, and then this is the image with the 1.4 extender on my 600mm prime lens. As we can see, one advantage of the prime lens is actually that it dissolves the background much better when I put the extender on. On the 100 to 500, for instance, if I put the extender on, the background more or less stays the same. But on this 600mm f4 lens, the background definitely becomes a lot smoother when using the extenders. However, if we zoom into 100%, we can see that the sharpness is still decent in both scenarios, but we're losing a lot of depth of field when using extenders up close and shooting them relatively wide open. So all the feet of the bird, the tail, the wing, the back of the head is all not fully sharp anymore. So personally, In this scenario, I would actually prefer to shoot with just 600 millimeters and crop, because I simply get a lot more depth of field on the bird and personally think get a slightly better overall image. What do you think? Does it bother you when the bird's feet or the tail is not really sharp? It's definitely something that I don't really like. So with a big prime lens, if the bird's relatively close, I often prefer to have it smaller in the frame and crop, rather than having it too large in the frame with the extender and then losing too much depth of field. So this is interesting because it's kind of the opposite to what I said before, where I want to get as many pixels as possible on the bird. But this was in a scenario where I was walking around with a zoom lens. But in this scenario with the rose robin, I'm only maybe 6-7 meters from the bird with a big prime lens. And in that scenario, it's definitely better to not use the extender, because you get a lot more sharpness and depth of field on the bird, and I think it gives you a slightly better result. So ultimately, when using extenders, you have to be aware that you're going to lose some light, you'll have to use higher ISO, the autofocus will struggle a little bit more, you have less depth of field, and overall your results will be slightly less consistent. So that sounds like a lot of drawbacks, but I think as I've shown you in this video, the extenders also have a lot of advantages. And so I think it's important that you think about when to use extenders and why you're using extenders. So why is it suddenly possible to use extenders with a lot more lenses than in the past? The main thing to me is the advances in the mirrorless technology and the much better autofocusing system that is now capable of autofocusing at like f22 in very dark conditions. This is simply something that DSLR cameras could not do. Most DSLR cameras could only focus with the lens being wide open at like f8, some at f11, but most DSLR cameras already struggle at the lens that's wide open at f8 with the 1.4 extender, for instance. So this is something that has truly changed the game for extender use, because I'm able to use the 100-500, the 2x extender on my R5 at f14 in dark conditions and shoot an owl in the middle of the forest. And I still get good and accurate autofocus. And this is simply something that you didn't have before. For instance, if you have a 100-400 with a 2x extender on a 5D Mark IV, it probably won't even autofocus, or if it does, it will be very slow, very inaccurate, and you're probably not going to get any good results. So this is where the mirrorless technology has really changed the game, also because you can use much higher ISOs now. And because you're losing some light when using the extenders, you have to stop down as well to get more sharpness. So you're often shooting at f8, f11, or like with this lens at f14. So what you have to do to compensate to have enough shutter speed for sharp images, bump up your ISO. On a lot of DSLR cameras, you couldn't really bump up your ISO high enough to actually get good enough shutter speed with extenders. But now you can, because on an R5 or an A1, you can shoot at like ISO 12,800 and still get some pretty usable results. So the combination of being able to use high ISO and have much better, much more accurate and just overall better autofocusing in cameras has really made it possible to use extenders on a much larger variety of lenses. Does that mean we should use extenders on all lenses now, no matter what? No. Generally speaking, the better the lens, the more expensive as well, except for the Sony 200-600, the better the lens will also be capable of taking extenders. Like big expensive 600mm prime lenses like you see behind me there can take the 1.4 or 2x extender and give you fantastic results. Extenders are really made for lenses that are already fantastic without extenders, so they can handle the loss and the drawbacks in image quality, in autofocusing speed, etc. when it comes to using extenders, and then still give you a decent output in the end. So my recommendation is still what it was in the past. Try to avoid extenders. If you're considering extenders, ask yourself, do I have a good enough lens that can handle extenders? For most zooms, I would say no, with the exception of the 100-400 version 2 that can handle the 1.4 extender alright if you stop down. I wasn't happy with the 2x extender on that lens at all. The 100 to 500 can handle both extenders within reason, and the Sony 200 to 600 did very well, and I think the Sony 100 to 400 handles the 1.4 extender pretty well as well. Of course, I haven't tried every single lens that's out there, but generally speaking, I would try to only use extenders on great quality zoom lenses or higher end prime lenses where they can really shine. Because what you don't really want to do is use an extender but then get worse image quality than you would have gotten if you simply cropped your images. Some of you might also ask, what about using the internal crop factors some of these newer cameras have, like an A1 where you can have a 1.5 crop factor, or an R5 where you can have a 1.6 crop factor. Isn't that like using an extender? It's actually not like using an extender, because all it does is basically the camera crops the image for you. There's some advantages, like you see your subject larger in your viewfinder, you have more pixels on the bird in the viewfinder, so it's easier for the autofocus to focus, but you're not actually gaining anything. You have the same result if you shot in 45 megapixels and cropped it yourself, or use the 1.6 crop factor and let the camera crop for you. So while it helps you to have the bird bigger in the frame, it doesn't give you any advantage over cropping later on the computer. So personally, I'm always a bit hesitant to use it, and I haven't really used it at all, because I always fear that I would be shooting at a 1.6 crop mode, bird raises its wings, and I clip them. If I had not shot in the crop mode, I would have had them and I would have been able to crop afterwards, whereas with the 1.6 crop activated, I might miss a shot that I wouldn't have missed if I was shooting in full frame. So that's the main reason I'm not using it. I hope this video could give you a good idea about extenders and when to use them, and when it might be better not to use them and use the bare lens and crop instead. As you've seen over the last few weeks, I've gotten some fantastic results with the extenders, but I would always say use extenders with caution. And if you can, you should always try to not use extenders, simply because there is a lot of drawbacks. However, in other situations, they can definitely be lifesavers and allow you to take images that you can't take otherwise. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments. Are you a fan of extenders? Are you using them a lot? Or do you think they're a waste of money and cropping is better? Let me know in the comments. Also make sure to check out my masterclass when you want to learn all about editing techniques that make your images look amazing. Give me a thumbs up for this video, share it with your friends, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in my next video very soon. Bye guys.